The church has abdicated its responsibility to the government, and they have stopped speaking out. And now we're seeing the uprisal.
Thank you so much for watching this segment of Reformed Dads. To see the full episode, join our Patreon community by going to patreon.com/reformeddads.
We've created an oligarchy of 9 people in black robes that are the supreme decision makers.
Right.
You know, apparently the executive branch of our government has to bow down to the judicial, and the legislative branch is bowing down to the judicial. And so we've created this oligarchy where if we would just stop and come back to what God's word says the government is there for, and then let the church step up and to take their responsibilities back. Because again, I've heard it said, and I think the last time I heard it said was probably Luke on one of the Apologia podcasts, or he may have even said it from the pulpit at one point in time. I don't know. But the voice in my head I hear saying this is Luke Pearson, and saying that the culture is the report card of the church.
Yes.
You know, the things that are happening in our culture right now are ultimately come down to the fact that the church has abdicated its responsibility to the government, and they have stopped speaking out. And now we're seeing the uprisal of churches that are speaking. We've got Apologia, we've got Christ Church up in Moscow, we've got all these churches, Refuge in Ogden. You know, we're seeing these, but not enough.
Sure.
We're not, because again, as these churches are stepping up and going, we want to see God's law acted out the way that God's law is supposed to be acted out. Then you have a whole nother group of people going, you're legalists, you're theonomists, you're bad, and so on. There's not a darn thing wrong with theonomy. Theonomy will help our culture and our society if we can appropriately, install it into our government and into the way things are going. But first, the church has got to step up and say, we are taking back our responsibility of what we are supposed to do as the church.
Amen.
And we are going to take away from the government the responsibilities that they have been given that should not be theirs.
Yeah.
I love it. Like, this is exactly where I was thinking. I'm so glad you went there. Like, there's that video where you see the BLM protesters getting, there's like a crowd of like, I'd say maybe like 500, 600 people before them, like bowing down before them and even putting their arms up. Well, that's what should be the report card to the church. These people should actually already know who to worship or who to go to for forgiveness.
Right.
Sure.
Right. So pagans are going to peg, right? And they're going to peg even harder when the Christians aren't out there proclaiming the gospel even to the state to keep the state in line. We're supposed to be the salt and the light.
Sure.
Right. We read in Matthew, I believe 28:18 through 20, right? We're making disciples and teaching them to observe all that Christ has commanded. Isaiah 9:6, to the increase of his government there will be no bounds, right? You can go all throughout the Bible with what Jesus proclaims. We are the ones who've made the biggest mistake within the last 70 or 80 years by actually being quiet where we shouldn't be quiet, where we should be the loudest. Our society is set up as a constitutional republic for the state to be involved for that very specific reason. Who is it who signed who signed the Declaration of Independence? One of the people, I think it's John Adams, who said that I think John Adams, who said that our society is created for a religious people. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's how America is supposed to function. But when you take literally a leg away from the United States of America, it's going to fall over, and that's what we're seeing.
Right. So what we are not saying, all of us here are not saying that we shouldn't fight against injustice, that we shouldn't march, that we shouldn't protest. We're not saying that.
Right. No.
But the message and way that we protest matters. The change that we call for matters, because if it's inconsistent with what God has instituted, then we're going nowhere.
Right. I mean, we're Protestants. We are Protestants. Yeah. And that is that's a way that that's how we get our voice heard. You know, again, during the Revolutionary War? Who were the loudest voices? Who were the voices that were calling out and saying, these are our grievances against the king?
Yep.
It was the Christians. It was the Puritans. It was these people who were going, look, this is what God's law says, and you are not acting in accordance with that.
Yep.
During slavery, who were the loudest voices? William Wilberforce, John Adams, all these people who were standing up and going, we are Christians, and we believe that the Bible tells us that man-selling is wrong.
Yeah.
Kidnapping and man-selling is wrong. This kind of chattel slavery is wrong. And those of you who are trying to use the Bible, Philemon and so on, to justify it, you are misinterpreting what that says, because we have a mandate in the law of God that says man-selling is wrong. And so the loudest voices during slavery were the Christians. Yeah. The loudest voices during the civil rights movement were Christians, were the loudest voices that were standing up and saying, the way that you are treating black people does not fall in accordance with the way that God says that these people should be treated, because they are image bearers of God. Yeah. And so the loudest voices in there were Christians. And then suddenly we get to this time in our history and the things that are happening, and the Christians have shut up. Yeah. The majority of Christians have shut their mouths because they're afraid to offend people. They're afraid to, who knows, whatever reasons. Yeah. The majority of the Christian message has changed so much that Joel Osteen can't preach to anything that's going on with Black Lives Matter, because again, according to his theology, all you got to do is believe in God and everything's going to be wonderful. That message, you can't take that message to India. You can't take that message to an oppressed people anywhere. You can't take that message to China. You can't take that message to Nigeria right now, where in the last, what month are we in? We're almost to July. In the last 6 months, almost 7 months, over 1,000 Christians have been killed in the country of Nigeria to this day by different groups, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Fulani militants, and so on. Those Christians are being murdered. You can't take that message to them, and you can't take that message to a black man who has a cop's knee on his neck for 9 minutes. Sure. You can't go to him with this is your best life now. You can't. Yeah. And so the majority of the Christian, quote-unquote Christian message, because it's not Christian, it's heresy, has become this, name it and claim it health and wealth. And sure. the rest of the church that is trying to make this theologically sound statement about how government should be is being drowned out by the overwhelming majority of imposter Christians.
Well, it's because churches have stopped talking about sin.
Right.
They've stopped talking about justice.
Right.
God cares about justice just as much as he gives his grace, right? He's a consistent God. He cares about justice, and he's a giver of grace, Amen. Right? And mercy. Amen. So we need to be consistent as well.
This addition versus submission. Sinners need forgiveness. Surrender to his lordship. Don't extort the grace he's given. See, I'm blessed by the one, Yahweh, all day. I'm a wretched sinner, deserve hell for always.